So can you explain to the audience on what grounds did the higher UK court overturn that initial decision that Assange could not be extradited?
Yeah, and just for the sake of being thorough in our discussion, let's come at this from two different perspectives. Let's come at it from the perspective of some people who are desperately trying to put a positive spin on this and who would like to believe that there's some way that Julian Assange can make it out alive. And then let's look at it from the grim point of view that is more dominant, that they really are keeping him in a kind of legal limbo that could result in his death and is slowly moving him closer towards death every day. I mean, if there's a doomsday clock for Julian Assange and it was 20 or 25 minutes before midnight, they moved the hand to 5 or 10 minutes before midnight today with this high court decision. That's what the U.S. was able to gain through this decision. So what's important about the High Court of Justice's decision is that it looked at the claim the United States government made that Judge Vanessa Baretzer applied an incorrect test when she determined it would be oppressive for health reasons, oppressive to him if he was extradited to the United States. They looked at that test and they said she did everything she should have done, that she considered all the information. She considered all the facts. There were even people who were witnesses who were called to testify who said things like the jail where he would be held in pretrial detention has a good record of taking care of prisoners. There were things that made it seem like it could be rosy for him in the U.S. prison system. And she still looked at it and went, I've heard from the psychologist who treated him and saw him regularly during his first 6 to 7 months in Belmarsh prison. And I think he's got a point. I think he's got a good, thorough analysis about the way that Julian Assange would not be able to resist suicidal impulses and would be driven to take his life if he was put in a U.S. prison or a jail. And so that's the ultimate outcome. And the High Court upheld that. They also did not, although they did in a very backhanded way, kind of endorse it, but ultimately they decided they weren't going to attack the professor, Michael Kopelman, who the U.S. government had tried to discredit because he was not forthright in informing the court that he knew that Julian Assange was in a relationship with Stella Morris, who was working for the legal team. So there's that. And then the other thing is to just say something about the nature of this process. Because no matter what, there was going to be you kind of said this, but no matter what, there's going to be an appeal to the Supreme Court. And the British Supreme Court was going to be hearing from the U.S. government if they did not like the outcome. If the High Court had ruled in favor of Assange, then the United States government would appeal to the British Supreme Court. And then now it's on the other side. Now on the other side is that Assange is going to appeal to the British Supreme Court. And they may actually get to even broaden the scope of their appeal to a degree that brings in some issues that the High Court of Justice were not willing to hear or consider seriously when they had the U.S. government before them.
Might I ask if one of those things that was not considered in the appeal today was the fact that a story came out that the United States was at least verbally plotting to assassinate or kidnap and assassinate Julian Assange, which I don't know. I maybe I'm coming off sarcastic, but just from a common sense denominator, if the basis of this is, oh no, the United States provided assurances that he would be protected, he wouldn't be in solitary confinement 23 hours of the day, there would be no risk of suicide. How could you? Was it not part of the evaluation by the higher court that the country making the assurances, a news outlet, Yahoo is pretty well known and respected, that they just reported systematically that the United States CIA was trying to kidnap or wanted to kidnap and assassinate him?
As I went through the ruling, it would appear that they overlooked entirely the Yahoo News report, even though Mark Summers, one of Assange's attorneys, spent an entire afternoon during a 2-day hearing talking about these issues, because for the reason that you are getting at, how can you trust that these are good faith? how can you believe that these are assurances that should be taken in good faith if there is hostility within the U.S. government? I mean, we have an executive branch agency that plotted to kidnap and perhaps worse, assassinate Julian Assange based on over 30 sources, a collection of over 30 sources within the Trump administration, the Trump White House, and the Justice Department, and then the CIA and other national security institutions. So this is something that should have been taken seriously, will be taken more seriously by the Supreme Court, but they'll at least have to respond to it, because I believe it'll be a focal point of the appeal from Julian Assange's legal team, which they'll submit within the next 14 days. So today is the 10th. Actually, just before we're all, presuming that you celebrate the holiday, before the Christmas holiday, they're going to be submitting this appeal. And sadly, Julian Assange is going to be isolated and unable to be with his family. And before I go forward into the grim parts of this, let's just point out the irony, because we have to. We are having this conversation on International Human Rights Day. And
let's also point out the irony that the president of the United States is holding a democracy conference at the White House today.
To coincide with International Human Rights Day. And he's making pronouncements about freedom of expression and democracy and human rights, the political prisoners. There's an incredible clip. I did a kind of a cut, and I put some pieces together to shorten it, but there's 2 or 3 minutes solid of Antony Blinken introducing a panel on political prisoners and using buzzwords like sham trials, climates of fear, Orwellian legal systems was something that was said by him. And it just cheapens all of these words. It renders them almost entirely meaningless that he's using them, because at the same time that he speaks these words about political prisoners in other countries, and I'm not here to suggest that they aren't truly political prisoners, the cases that he raises, though it's interesting. One of the ones he spoke about is actually in Ecuador and became a political prisoner because of the fact that she was cracked down upon by Lenin Moreno, the Ecuador president who is responsible for the pressure campaign against Julian Assange, who the U.S. government made a pact with in order to push him out and get him into the grip of British authorities for this extradition. So I'll push on and give the important facts that are eating away at supporters of Julian Assange today, and anyone who cares about press freedom, anybody who cares about the future of journalism, because these diplomatic assurances, and I can outline them here before we go too far ahead. What they said was the U.S. government pledged that Julian Assange would not be put in a supermax prison in Florence, Colorado, unless he commits some future act where he would qualify and could be designated for being put in a supermax prison. Then when it came to special administrative measures, they said he won't be put in special administrative measures except if he commits some future act in which we could designate him for special administrative measures. Mm-hmm. They said that we will give him mental health treatment if he needs. When he goes to a facility, we'll make sure the assigned physician or psychologist gives him that attention. And then they said he could apply. And let's be very clear about this. They said he may apply for a prisoner transfer to Australia under a treaty or an agreement that the U.S. has with Australia, so that he could serve out his prison sentence in Australia if he is convicted. And I'm being careful about those words that I use, because it did not say that they would grant the application. It just said that they would allow him to apply, which is a totally meaningless pledge, because any prisoner who comes to the U.S. from Australia or who is an Australian would have the ability to petition the U.S. government to be transferred, and the U.S. could reject it. So they're not actually making a concession, is my point. Anyways, the High Court decided that all of these should be taken in good faith. There's no reason not to believe them, ignoring the stories from Yahoo News, ignoring the work of El País and other organizations that have called into question the nature of the U.S. government in going after and targeting Julian Assange. And they basically put the diplomatic relationship between the United States and the United Kingdom ahead of justice in this case. What they said was there's a lot of history between the U.S. and the U.K. And so why create bad blood? We don't want that to happen here by rejecting this extradition request. There's a lot of history of extraditions between the UK and the United States, and we're not going to stop allowing extraditions today. I'm paraphrasing, but I'm not going too far afield from what was actually written in this decision. And that has nothing to do with the merits of this case and whether it's true or not that Julian Assange would be oppressed if he was extradited to the United States. It's too bad. I'm sorry if he were to be extradited and were to find himself attempting suicide because of what was done to him. I'm sorry if what would fall by the wayside by blocking this is the diplomatic relationship between the United States and the UK. But we've seen this actually in the WikiLeaks story. If you go back to when we were reading the U.S. cables, the over 250,000 cables. One of the things that the State Department panicked about is what it would do to diplomatic relations between countries. Mm-hmm. Well, diplomatic relations be damned. I mean, there's certain things we need to know and confront, and maybe they create tensions between two countries that have worked together. But sometimes getting to the bottom of war crimes and torture and abuse and corporate exploitation and other issues is more important than how cordial and polite two parties are able to be in official capacities.